Shut up and sit down.
What's up, MMA people? This is Fat Tony here with the UFC 232 main card breakdown. This is the first podcast that I'm putting out, but definitely won't be the last. And you'll see every week we'll kind of get better as we kind of get on this adventure together. Now, if you're not an MMA fan, I highly suggest that you get the fuck out of here. You really won't understand what I'm talking about unless you're really into MMA like I am. So if you are into MMA, you've definitely found a unique voice in the medium. I frankly don't work for anybody. I have zero interest in any of the fighters other than the fact that I want them to put on great fights. And that's about it. I'm not on Twitter, so you can shove it up your ass. But if you want to holler at me directly through the comment section, bring it on. I welcome any and all feedback, positive, negative, white privileged, however you want to give it to me, I'll take it. But basically today, what we're going to do for this inaugural MMA podcast is just break down the main card of UFC 232, which is now slated to take place in Inglewood, California. Obviously, there was huge breaking news this week about a anomaly in John Jones' testing. It's been discussed by Dana White and Jeff Nowitzki, aka the Golden Snitch, shout out to Brendan Schaub, that this anomaly is just something that is an effect of his earlier tests. So it goes without saying that they strongly believe what's been found in his bloodstream will not have any type of advantage from a performance standpoint. Anyway, we'll get into that with that breakdown, but what I'm going to do now is start with the first fight opening up the main card, and that is between Chad Mendes. It's his second fight back from his USADA violation, and Alexander, let me say this right, Volkanovski, who's pretty much, been flying under the radar. I've seen him fight a couple times, and the guy is, he's a beast. He really is a handful. He's a freestyle fighter. He is riding a huge win streak right now. Let's see what he's most notably, what's most notable as of late. Yeah, his win recently over Darren Elkins at UFC Fight Night 133. That was by unanimous decision. Darren Elkins is a game fighter. He's a savage, and Alexander was able to get the unanimous decision win. Before that, he fought Jeremy Kennedy, who's also a great fighter. He stopped Jeremy Kennedy TKO punches, but truly, Chad Mendes, I think, is going to be his greatest contest up to this point. And for Chad Mendes, you're back from a suspension. You had an impressive fight against Miles Jury. He also fought on the UFC Fight Night 133 card. So these guys definitely know one another. They definitely are very similar in the sense of they are both aggressive. Chad Mendes obviously has a huge wrestling base and background. But he can chuck him, that's for sure. He's gone against some really upper echelon competition in his career. Most notable wins, Ricardo Lamas, Nick Lentz, Clay Guida, Darren Elkins he beat as well. He finished Darren Elkins, interestingly enough, by KO. And obviously he's got some losses, but his losses are among the MMA elite. He's lost twice to Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor, of course, and Frankie Edgar. So even with those losses, he's still definitely got the rub from competing with that upper echelon competition. So I definitely think this is going to be a dogfight. I can see Alexander, the Great, as he's known. I can see him finishing the fight early. But I think that Chad Mendes is going to need to take a cautious and cerebral approach with Volkanovski here. And it's definitely a really exciting fight to open up the card with. Obviously, the winner is going to be really thrown into the mix at 145. And with Max Holloway being so dominant with his last performance against Brian Ortega, I mean, he's looking for another dance partner. And if Chad Mendes has a huge win, I could see him maybe getting the nod. Or maybe he'll have a rematch with Frankie Edgar, and the winner of that will fight Max Holloway. Who knows? It's hard to say, but huge implications for the winner of this fight. So best of luck to both fighters. If I had to pick a winner, I think I'd have to go with the dark horse. I think I'd have to go with Alexander Volkanovski, just because he's really on a surge. He's been stopping fighters. He's been known to go to decision, but he seems to be winning these unanimous decisions pretty handedly. But again, Chad Mendes is no joke, so it's going to be a great fight. But I'm going to go with the dark horse, and I'm going to go with Alexander Volkanovski. Shit, it's a tough choice, but let's go with Volkanovski. All right, so the second fight on the main card after the Mendes and Volkanovski fight is Ilir Latifi. He's a training partner of Gustafsson, so he definitely has been training hard for this fight, and he's fighting Corey Anderson, who's a beast. I mean, let's just look at the tail of the tape, how these two match up together. Corey Anderson is 7 years younger. He's taller, and he's got a significant reach advantage, but Latifi is an absolute gorilla. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that has some serious freakish abilities. I mean, he's right up there. He's a scary, scary dude. And he's going to be gunning for a finish, I think, against Corey Anderson. I want to look into their past performances and give us an idea of what type of winning streaks or losing streaks they're both riding. Okay, so Latifi's coming off a submission, round one submission of Ovin St. Preux. Very impressive. That was at UFC Fox 28. The funny thing about this guy is he looks like one of my buddies, lives across the street from me. Shout out to RC, Rick Catalonia. You got a bald brother over here, buddy. So, okay, we got the submission win over Ovin St. Preux. We've got a decision win over Tyson Pedro. He lost against Ryan Bader, that was a nasty knockout. That was a knee. So he's been quite active, and he's won 2 in a row. So Latifi, the sledgehammer, definitely looking to string a couple wins together here at light heavyweight. It could be interesting. Corey Anderson, let's have a look. So Corey Anderson he's coming off a win. Okay, so he had a decision win over Glover Teixeira in his last fight, and he has a win over Patrick Cummins, who's a game fighter. Again, a decision. He did get knocked out by Ovin St. Preux via head kick, and he has been knocked out by Jimmy Manua. He's got a win over Sean O'Connell. He's got a loss against Mauricio Shogun Rua, split decision loss. That was a great fight. But it looks like he's got some issues with some of the strikers and harder hitters in the division. I mean, Glover, mind you, is a hell of a puncher, and he's been known for his power over the years and knockout ability. But I mean, Glover's kind of getting nearing the end of the road here, and I see a decision win here against Glover. So, I mean, for me to really think that Corey Anderson poses a huge threat, I would have liked to see him have finished Glover rather than get the decision. But this should definitely be an interesting matchup. It could be. It could be. It's a really big fight for both of them. Definitely put them right up there. I mean, very, very important fight for both of them. If I had to pick a winner, I'm going to go with Latifi. I think that he's going to be very well trained and conditioned for this fight. They don't call him the sledgehammer for nothing. The guy's got dynamite in his hands. He's a beast. Being the shorter fighter, he's definitely going to have to get to the inside of Corey Anderson. If you are Corey Anderson, you're going to want to keep him to the outside and really maybe try and take Latifi into the later rounds. Hope for Latifi maybe to gas out a little bit. But I think we got Latifi as a standout in this fight. So I'm going to pick him to win by knockout. I'm going to go Latifi by knockout. And I think it could potentially be a good night for Sweden in Inglewood. Who the hell ever thought you would say that? But I'm going to go with Latifi again. Third fight. The assassin, Carlos Condit. He's fallen on some rough times lately. He's... Obviously, he's was inactive for quite some time. Then he came back, and he's had some challenging fights. He's definitely, he's a top dog at welterweight. He's got a shitload of experience. He's very, very tough, very difficult to put away, and he's a dangerous fighter. I mean, he's as close to a ninja assassin as you get. He's taken on Michael Chiesa, who has moved up to welterweight. He decided not to continue doing the weight cut down to 155. I believe his last fight at 155 was he lost against Anthony Pettis by submission. And I think he said after that fight that he wouldn't be doing the weight cut anymore. I'm not even sure he made weight for that fight, to be honest. But this is a huge challenge for Chiesa. Now, it's not a challenge that I think he can't win. It'll be interesting to see how he adapts to the welterweight division. That weight cut could be really weighing on him. And it could have affected his last performance against Anthony Pettis for sure. But let's look a little bit more at their more recent records. We'll start with Condit, the natural-born killer. Yeah, so Condit is he's really struggling here, like I mentioned. He's lost 4 in a row. He's lost to Damien. First off, he lost to Robbie Lawler. It was a close fight, though, very competitive, but he lost a split decision. Then he was submitted by Damian Maia, which was brutal. Talk about disappointing. Round 1 submitted, and he's got great ground game, but it goes to show you Damian Maia, once he puts the squeeze on you, it's really difficult to get out of it. And then we've got he lost to Neil Magny, unanimous decision. And here we go. His last fight, he lost to Alex Oliveira by submission, guillotine. But it looks like the natural-born killer, he might be due for a win here. I don't know if he gets it, because it's hard to see if that fire is still there. His last win was against Thiago Alves. And then obviously he had lost to Tyron Woodley before that. So for Carlos Condit, this is a must-win. If he loses to Chiesa, that makes it 5 in a row. And I think it starts to become very difficult to justify keeping him on the UFC roster. It might be time to put him out to pasture. Who knows? But he's definitely got he's gonna have his hands full with Michael Chiesa. He's a game fighter. And he could be doing great at this new weight class. Time will tell. So let's just have a look at Michael Chiesa's record a little bit closer. Okay, so he's similar to Carlos Condit. He's on a two fight skid. He lost to Kevin Lee, by submission, which was controversial in itself, but he lost, and he was submitted by Anthony Pettis. His most notable wins as of late, he's got a submission against Jim Miller. Again, Jim Miller at the end of his career. He's got a submission over Dariush. So look, he's got some good wins, but he's definitely had to make a change in his career here. Moving up to welterweight, making that decision is huge. And if he can't get the win against Carlos Condit, I think he's just as likely to get cut from the UFC as Carlos Condit. That's just my opinion. But he's younger. It's hard to say if Carlos still has the fire burning. I mean, he's definitely due for a win, though. 4 in a row. Fuck. You gotta wonder, what's the motivation at this stage for Carlos Condit? Why is he doing it? I mean, is he doing it just to try and squeeze out that one last win? Go out on top? I don't know. Because, I mean, goddamn, you look at the welterweight division and you try and put yourself in his shoes and just, where do you go from here with a win over Michael Chiesa? Even if you win, where does that put you at welterweight? I mean, Michael Chiesa, he's new to this division, so really he's not... Chiesa's nowhere in the top 10, in my opinion. Welterweight, not even close. So, I mean, I'm hoping for Carlos Condit to win. I really am. I'd love to see him win. And at that point, if he wants to retire again, I have no issues with that. I think he's had a great career. I think he's getting older. But I think it would be great for him to go out on a win. Or, maybe he... I just don't understand what more he's trying to get out of his run in the UFC. I mean, let's say he wins. Let's say not only does he win, but let's say he wins impressive in a very impressive fashion. Let's say he head kick KOs Michael Chiesa in the second round. Let's say he really, or you know what? Let's not even say head kick KO. Let's just say he beats down Michael Chiesa. It's a clear one-sided victory. Who does he fight next? Who would you even think about pairing him up with? I don't know. But look, I'm going to make an emotional decision here. I think physically, Michael Chiesa probably has the strength advantage. I think that he's going to be feeling good because listen, he doesn't have to cut an extra, 20 pounds. That's huge. So his energy levels, I'd expect his energy levels to be really high. I'd expect a lot of output from him. So the gambler in me, I'd have to see the odds, but I could only assume that Carlos Condit is an underdog in this fight. My heart says Carlos Condit. My mind says Michael Chiesa. I don't really see either one of these guys getting the finish. But if someone is going to get the finish, I would say that it's going to be Michael Chiesa. But I wish that it was Carlos Condit, if that makes any sense. So that's it. So we're really kind of making our way through the card now. 3 fights in. And then what do we got next? I think we've got... Oh, yes. Probably the most exciting women's MMA fight of all time. Or at least the potential to be. We've got just a monster, just a beast, Chris Cyborg, taking on Amanda Nunes, fellow Brazilian nonetheless. So Amanda Nunes had said in one of the UFC Embedded episodes that this was going to be like the Brazilian World Cup, which I like. You know, I understand the spirit of it. I understand the need to test yourselves. And I think Amanda Nunes does need a test. I think in order for her to have that breakthrough moment, because even though she's the champ in her division, I mean, she's nowhere near as popular as Ronda Rousey. And I don't know why that is. I personally think she's super exciting. Very dynamic striker. I mean, she puts pop on the end of her punches. She's really, really, really well-rounded. I mean, she fucking put a beatdown on Raquel Pennington. A beatdown. It was like a bully beatdown. And to me, that was the signal that, you know, she needs a tougher opponent. She really does. And I think she 100% found it in Chris Cyborg, because there's no fucking way that she's going to bully beat down Chris Cyborg. That's just not going to fucking happen. I think this fight is really interesting also because I think Chris Cyborg's not going to be able to bully beat down Amanda Nunes. I really do. I think Amanda Nunes has the potential to be her biggest test. You know, power-wise, look, we all know that Chris Cyborg, power-wise, there's you can't hold a candle to her. She is definitely more powerful than Amanda Nunes. Definitely. Experience-wise, I mean, she's got, you know, a couple more fights than Nunes, but whatever. They're both at the top of their game right now. Chris Cyborg obviously has been training under Jason Perillo, and her boxing has never looked better. You can tell that she's becoming more cerebral with her hands, as opposed to her earlier fights where she would literally just maul girls. She's going to this state of rage, and just, if it wasn't for the ref, I mean, these girls would be getting killed. There'd be murder. There'd be Chris Cyborg, the murderer, would be her ring name. So she's definitely has that ability, that power. But if she gets too aggressive with Amanda Nunes, and if she doesn't mind her P's and Q's, she's going to get stunned. Amanda Nunes has the ability to throw that crushing straight right, and like there's pop on it. The way she turns her hips into her shots, the way she sits down on them. I mean, she can definitely stun Chris Cyborg. And I don't think we've ever really seen Chris Cyborg stunned. And I think that's what's so interesting about this fight. What happens if Chris Cyborg faces someone that hurts her, that stuns her? Who knows? I mean, it could just make her bite down on the mouthpiece and finish the fight. Who knows? I mean, it could get to her head. It could nonetheless, for sure though, if you're Amanda Nunes, you have to get Chris Cyborg to respect you, and early. You can't let Chris Cyborg walk you down and pick you apart and land those big overhand rights. You just can't. You have to do something early to show her that she's going to have to respect you and respect your distance, respect your power, and respect your ability. I'll tell you what would be interesting is if this fight goes to the ground. I think everyone's expecting a striking battle, but I'd be interested to see if this fight goes to the ground, how they match up. I mean, they're both highly skilled jiu-jitsu players, 100%. Chris is obviously going to have the size advantage. But I don't really see Cyborg wanting to fight on the ground. I think she could gas out. I don't think it would be great for her. If you're Amanda Nunes, I wonder if you're looking for the takedown. It'd be interesting to see what type of strategy they're both coming into in this fight. I would think that Chris Cyborg is going to have more of a cautious strategy, because she's not going to want to get clipped by Amanda, because she knows if she gets clipped, it could be a very tough night. So I could see Cyborg coming in a little bit, not hesitant, but patient. And she's gonna definitely have to she's gonna have to work on some head movement. She's gonna have to keep a good distance. Amanda Nunes got some great kicks too. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, even Amanda Nunes, if you're her corner, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what her coaches have planned out for her. Holly Holm did great against Cyborg. I think that if you're Amanda Nunes, you're watching that fight over and over and over again. And obviously Amanda Nunes doesn't move like Holly Holm, but she's definitely got great stand-up. And she can definitely take away some important lessons from Holly Holm. Listen, I mean, it's hard to pick against Chris Cyborg at featherweight. It really is. Amanda Nunes 100% is the best women's bantamweight. Let's just look at their stats here. Tail of the tape. They're both in their 30s. Cyborg's 33. Nunes is 30. Same height, same weight. Pretty much identical reach. Not much to take away from that. Physically, but physically you can tell that Chris Cyborg is definitely more imposing. But Amanda Nunes has got some broad shoulders, and she really, she's no joke. I just want to look back at her last couple fights here. Obviously, I mentioned her complete domination of Raquel Pennington was her last fight. Then she's got the split decision win over Valentina. That was a tough fight, but she won though. She won that fight. She's got the KO over Ronda Rousey, submission over Miesha Tate. She's got a decision win over Valentina again. Sarah McMahon, Shayna Baszler. Her last loss was in 2014. She lost to Kat Zingano. She's on a 7-fight win streak. Trying to make it 8. She'd be the first women's MMA fighter to hold 2 belts in 2 divisions. This is why I think it's really important not to overlook Amanda Nunes in this fight, is the motivation. I try and consider, okay, physically, they're very similar. They're both on an absolute tear. They both got great stand-up, great power, very well-rounded. I think what it comes down to is the motivation factor. Who's more motivated to get the win? Who's got more to lose or more to gain? And I think absolutely, without a doubt, Amanda Nunes has more to gain, far less to lose. But the gain, becoming the first female MMA athlete to hold 2 belts in 2 divisions and to have dethroned Chris Cyborg to get your 2nd belt at featherweight, it's almost unfathomable. Like, if somebody tried to put this together years ago, obviously there was always talk about Cyborg and Rousey fighting, but it never happened, which is a good thing looking back on it, because the demise of Ronda Rousey would have came a lot sooner and probably a lot more viciously. So anyway, in terms of motivation though, I think that Amanda Nunes absolutely has more motivation going into this fight. Chris Cyborg, no doubt, the motivation is to continue to cement yourself as the best women's MMA fighter of all time. And I think she very well knows that Amanda Nunes is going to be her toughest competition. So, and I think the world knows that too. So that's her motivation. I think that the motivation factor, I think that Amanda Nunes edges her out. Just looking quickly here at Cyborg's last couple of fights, notable wins. We got a TKO against Yana Kunitskaya. We've got the decision win over Holly Holm. TKO of Tanya Evinger. Yeah, so, yeah, she's pretty much gorilla fucking everybody that steps in the octagon with her. But I don't think that's going to happen this time. I mean, it absolutely could, but I don't think it's going to. And if you're Chris Cyborg, I think you really have to come into this cautious. She had mentioned at the press conference that she was going to push Amanda back, because I think Amanda's had some difficulty with dealing with being on the defensive rather than moving forward and pressuring her opponents. But I feel like Amanda Nunes might be a little bit faster than Chris. Maybe get in and out a little bit more. Maybe her boxing might be a little bit crisper, but you know, Cyborg definitely has that one punch knockout power, but so does Nunes. I mean, definitely. So look, I'm going to make a prediction for this fight, and I'm going to explain why. I'm thinking I'm going to go with Amanda Nunes in this fight. I'm picking her to win, and the reason I'm picking her to win is that I always side with history. I always evaluate what would have the greatest historical impact, what would really staple itself in the history books. And to me, I feel like the Amanda Nunes win would be huge. It's similar to when Conor McGregor fought Eddie Alvarez in Madison Square Garden and got his second belt. A lot of people were overlooking Conor McGregor in that fight. They thought that because Chad Mendes is a wrestler and strong and had some success with him, they thought that Eddie Alvarez would probably just bully him. But I didn't hear many people talking about the historical significance of a Conor McGregor win. And that absolutely has an effect, 100%. So I'm going to go with Amanda Nunes. And I don't know if she has it in her to finish Cyborg, but I think that she definitely has it in her to go 5 rounds with Cyborg. It'll be interesting. That's a great fight. To me, that could be a main event in itself. That could be on its own card. That could headline. The fact that it's the co-main event just goes to show you how amazing this card really is. Even with the venue change last minute, I think it was the right call. A lot of people are upset with it, but I think it was the right call. The show must go on, and what's so bad about having it in LA? I think it's a great venue, especially last minute. So, I don't know, this whole event is watermarked, I should say, for greatness. It really is. Which brings us to the main event, the final fight on the card. The long-awaited return of Jon Jones, the infamous Jon Jones, coming back after suspension for, a well-documented USADA violation. But he's back, nonetheless. And he's taking on perhaps his what will be his biggest foe in Alexander Gustafsson, the Mauler. I'm not going to go into the history of these two. I think that most of the people that have continued to listen to this podcast probably know about their last fight, know how close it was. I recently rewatched it, and I thought that Alexander Gustafsson won the fight. But very close. I mean, it definitely not a unanimous. It would be a split decision win. But I felt that he won the first 3 rounds. But John Jones, I mean, really poured it on in the championship rounds. He had Alexander in all kinds of trouble, which is why I could see them giving John the decision. I'm not even mad at the decision, honestly. It could have gone either way. At the end of the day, it is a fight. And throughout the 5 rounds, even though Alexander Gustafsson was very effective with his movement, with his feints, with his boxing, with his wrestling, I mean, he took Jones down. He stuffed all of, maybe not all, but he stuffed almost all of Jones' takedowns. But at the end of the day, it's still a fight. And John Jones was closer to finishing him within that 25 minutes than Alexander was to finishing Jones. So I could see why they gave it to the champion. If you're going to take the belt from the champion, you have to take it from him. It can't just be handed over to you. You got to take it. So, and I think Alexander Gustafsson is well aware of that. So anyway, we now have this epic rematch, 5 years in the making. And I'm excited. I mean, I'm a huge John Jones fan. I think the fact that he has decided to be himself and kind of say fuck it to this good boy image that he was trying to play by, I think that's going to be great for him in the long run. But man, you want to talk about having your back up against the wall. I mean, is it any more can you get any more pressure than what John Jones must be feeling right now? After everything he's been through in his career, to have to come back from all of that and then have all of this controversy the week before the fight. Everyone calling you a cheater, everyone really questioning your motives, having the venue move to LA, all that, and we're going to make sure that you fight the guy that probably gave you, not even probably, the guy that gave you the most difficult fight of your career. That's who you're going to fight against. That's who you're coming back to fight against. It doesn't get any crazier than that. But again, and as I mentioned with the whole Amanda Nunes and Chris Cyborg thing, I think that history has a funny way of peeking its head into these events. What has the more historical significance? Is it John Jones, this cinematic comeback story, the Showtime movie in the making? Or is it going to be Alexander Gustafsson? I mean, finally beating John Jones, proving to the world that he is the best light heavyweight. He'd be the only person to beat John Jones. He'd be the first Swede to have a UFC title. It would be huge. I mean, the stakes don't get any higher for both of these fighters. They really don't. You can't write this shit. This is the most unbelievable opportunity for both of these fighters. So let's just quickly look at their last couple fights here. A quick analysis. So we got Jones. His last fight was against Daniel Cormier, which was ruled a no contest. Which, I mean, I think we all know that's bullshit. He beat him. He head kicked him. He knocked him out. All right? I don't give a shit. I don't care that he had microscopic steroids in his system. That's not what landed that head kick. What landed that head kick was strategy, was practice, was not breaking from your plan. I mean, he capitalized on a weakness that he picked up through studying Daniel Cormier. So all that steroid nonsense, that does not take that win away from John Jones. Then he's got the win over Ovince St. Preux, which was a tough fight for him. A lot of people think he underperformed that fight. I don't think he underperformed. I think Ovince St. Preux is a tough guy. He's very, very, very powerful, very awkward striker. So I think Jones came back, and again, that was after a huge layoff. So does ring rust play a factor? I mean, it definitely could, and it should. And then before that, he had his win over Daniel Cormier, decision. Then he finished, no, he didn't finish, but he got a decision over Glover. Then he got his win over Gustafsson. So, I mean, listen, he's beat a who's who of MMA greatness. The real question is, how does he stack up for this fight? So, with that said, let's take a quick peek at the Mauler's resume, his last several outings. Who, I mean, he's never looked better his last two fights. He really hasn't. So we got his Mortal Kombat finish of Glover Teixeira in round 5. Probably the most insane display of boxing. That knockout was unbelievable. Then he's got a win over Jan Blachowicz, and then the loss to Daniel Cormier and the loss to Anthony Johnson. Before that, he had a win against Manua, and before that was the loss to Jones. Definitely a dangerous opponent for Jones coming off this long layoff. So it'll be interesting. Again, I think that this is a totally different fight, even though you can watch their first contest and try and come up with some type of analysis. I really feel that this is going to be a different fight. I think Jon Jones is completely in a new headspace, in a different headspace. I think that he's absolutely more motivated and focused. But, you know, the same can be said about Gustafsson. Why wouldn't he be? He's got two new kids. He's got a wife. He's coming off some impressive wins. He's got a lot going for him. If anyone's going to beat Jon Jones at light heavyweight, you got to think that it's going to be Alexander Gustafsson. And imagine if he did beat him, and it sets up a trilogy. That would be great too. I mean, they should have had a rematch right away, in all honesty. What the UFC did to Gustafsson is similar to what they have done to Stipe Miocic. They really have. Both of these guys had impressive showings. I mean, look, Stipe, he did lose to Dan Cormier. He got knocked out. Yeah, he did. But he was still the longest reigning UFC heavyweight of all time. Give the guy a rematch. The same goes for Gustafsson, his last fight with Jones. How he didn't get a rematch, I have no clue. I could only think that it had something to do with Jones and his camp not wanting the rematch. So, anyway, with that said, I got to make a prediction. I mean, I have to. I got to say, look, do I think Alexander Gustafsson got lucky that first fight? No. I really, was he lucky that Jones wasn't focused and wasn't prepared? No. I mean, how could he have been lucky? He wasn't. He was in a war, a 5-round war. What about that is luck? So no, he wasn't lucky. He's a great fucking fighter. He's a beast. He's tall, he's rangy, he's slick. He obviously has knockout power. He knows how to put together his punches, like very, very high level boxing. And he's continued to work on that. And I know Jon Jones has really emphasized working on his boxing. I mean, following him on Instagram and social media, you can see that he's really been putting in the hours I don't know how many practical sparring hours he's had, but I do know that what he's going to have in front of him won't have been emulated in the gym. There is no other Alexander Gustafsson. Just like there's no other John Jones. There really isn't. So without further ado, I'm gonna have to make a decision, and I'm gonna have to go with John Jones. Again, I think that this has a huge historical significance in the history of the sport. And I just think in terms of where these guys were at 5 years ago to now, I feel like John Jones may have evolved a little bit more as a fighter. He's definitely bigger. He's more built. He's definitely not going to underestimate Gustafsson this time around. He's going to be well-trained, well-conditioned. But again, Alexander Gustafsson really has the ability to put him away. He really could. John Jones, when he gets hit, he does lean way back. If you watch a lot of his fights, when he gets hit, he leans way back. And against most fighters, that's okay because they're shorter than him. But with Alexander Gustafsson, he's going to have the ability to close that distance, to close that gap quicker. And if Jones isn't careful and doesn't think that Alexander is going to capitalize on those scenarios, that Alexander has been watching tape brewing for 5 years, it's going to be a chess match, definitely. I don't think that we're going to see somebody get finished in the first or second round. I think that Jones is going to come out very cautious, throwing a lot of kicks similar to the first fight. What would be interesting here would be to see if John Jones takes Alexander down. Because I know in the first fight he couldn't. He could not get Gustafsson to the ground. And I think he got him down once, but Gustafsson got up right away. And I think if you're John Jones and you've always had that ability to grab guys and throw them to the ground and hold them there and beat them down with elbows and really dominate them on the ground, the fact that he wasn't able to do that to Alexander Gustafsson, I think is a sticking point for him. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see Jones really push for a takedown and try and take some of the wind out of Gustafsson's sails early. Because Gustafsson really had a lot of success early on in that fight. And I think he will have success early on in this fight unless John Jones stifles it. And I don't think John Jones is going to knock him out. We've never really seen John Jones as a knockout artist. He's stopped fights by TKO. I mean, when he smells blood, the fight's over. But in terms of one-punch knockout, we haven't really seen that. We've seen that out of Gustafsson. He's been able to finish people one punch. Or at least, a quick barrage of punches, combination of punches. But they're out. It's done. We've seen it. And he could do that to John Jones. John Jones better be fucking careful. He better be. So anyway, I'm going John Jones with the win. I could see this one going the distance again. But I can also envision John Jones making a huge statement and finishing Gustafsson maybe the third or fourth round. I think that would really, really set up the third fight with Daniel Cormier. If he could finish Gustafsson, Anthony Johnson has finished Gustafsson, but if John Jones could finish Gustafsson with his comeback fight, if he finishes him, there's a couple other guys at light heavyweight to fight right now, but come on. We want to see John Jones fight DC again at heavyweight. Let's see it. Winner gets Brock Lesnar. What bigger motivation do you need that? The winner of the fight gets to fight a vanilla gorilla with probably like a $3-4 million payout. And then some on pay-per-view numbers. I think then you'd see probably the most motivated Daniel Cormier. Probably the most comfortable, not having to cut down to 205. But then John Jones has time to bulk up as well, but I don't think he will. I think he'll stay lean. Rely on his speed and quickness. Again, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Still a lot of things to play out. So, that's it. UFC 232. That's the first Fat Tony MMA podcast in the books. I doubt anybody's stuck around to listen to this. Maybe like 2 or 3 people that are sick in the fucking head. But if you are one of those people, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we'll come back to you, I guess. What we'll do is maybe we'll do a recap show next. See how this all pans out. And we'll come back. That's it from Montreal. God bless. Love you, motherfuckers. Mwah!